Welcome to today's webinar. Today we're covering BX Manufacturing, which is an extension to SAP Business One production. Today we're going to be demonstrating the scheduling logic that BX Manufacturing brings to the table, how the bill of material sets up with operations, features, and work centers, how the production order can then be scheduled with our job scheduling control panel, and also how we can manage our production orders using the production management cockpit. Then we'll talk about how we enhance the MRP functionality within SAP Business One, and then I'll show quickly how the make-to-order functionality works. We'll then look at manufacturing execution, so releasing production orders, scheduling production orders, and then we'll do some shop floor data collection. So I'm going to try and keep this within the hour. Normally to present all of this takes about an hour and a half. And then in the future I'm planning on breaking these out into smaller little bite-sized sessions. So I welcome you to keep posted on our different webinars so that you can see what we have coming in the future. This is me. I'm Tyson McMurran. I'm a CPA, CMA. I'm based out of Winnipeg, Canada. I'm in the Central Time Zone, and I do partner enablement for the Americas. And I'm also going to be a product sponsor for a new product, and I'll talk about that in a second here when we get to our product slides. Protomix ourselves, we were founded in March 2004. We're headquartered in Brussels, or actually Perk, which is near Brussels in Belgium, and we have operating offices in 2 countries other than Belgium. One is Atlanta, Georgia, and the other is Budapest, Hungary, and we have consultants spread out throughout the world, similar to me, out here in Winnipeg. We're part of a larger organization called Mobilitas. Mobilitas is a ECC or a R3 implementer of SAP. And the Protomix business is the SAP Business One practice within that group. We're owned by a venture capital group called Keystone Capital, and they're based out of Chicago. And they wanted to get into warehousing technologies, and they invested in Mobilitas for the technology and implementation side of things, and they invested in a sister company of ours called Peak Risix. And Peak Risix does hardware technology for supply chain. So thermal printers and labels and magnets and scanners and all of any data points and all of that kind of service Peak Risix looks after. So together we really offer kind of a whole shop floor to top floor integration of both software and hardware. Protomix ourselves, we're focused 100% of SAP Business One, so we don't do any development for any other ERP products. And our goal, like I said, is shop floor to top floor integration, so real-time sharing of information. When it happens on the shop floor, we want the top floor to know. And we do that through add-on development within SAP Business One, and I'll bring up a slide in a few seconds here that kind of shows our product offering. It's important to note we're part of the SAP Partner Advisory Council, so we have a seat at the table to help SAP with direction of development, and also an ability to talk with the developers about, the good and bad about SAP Business One, and to really help make sure that our ecosystem is successful. So we have about 300 installations in 30 countries on 6 continents, and we work with 40 SAP Business One partners worldwide on a day-to-day basis. So we truly are a global software solution partner. I said that I'd talk about our product offerings. So when you think of Protomix, we want you to think about production and warehouse. And within production, we have a few different options available. And you can see here we kind of have advanced and entry level. And today's webinar is focused on the advanced production, which was called BX Core for some time. We're calling it BX Manufacturing. And then the BX Core has kind of a core production a make to order, and then it has mobility tied to it where we can do production data collection and quality control off of a shop floor. And then our PDMX WMS system has capabilities to do production within SAP Business One, where we can receive goods, issue goods, pick items, but it doesn't really do any of the resource capture or any of the stuff that most traditional manufacturers or discrete manufacturers would want to do. But if you have customers that are just gathering goods and sorting and palleting and like some of that 3PL stuff, the PDMX production does a really good job at that. And at ASUG Americas just last month, we launched a new product, and it's called BX Mobile Worker. I have webinars on Thursdays, so you're more than welcome to join me on Thursday to see how the BX Mobile Worker works. And in the chat log, I've dropped in a link here to the YouTube playlist. And on the YouTube playlist, there's a mobile worker playlist there, and it has a couple videos right now of how the mobile worker works. As it's a new product, we're still going to be adding videos kind of on a weekly basis. Then on the warehousing side, we have an advanced warehouse management solution, and we have our BX Mobile Warehouse, which does standard SAP Business One inventory movements and transactions on handheld devices. So enough of Protomix and products and all of that. I've spent my 4 or 5 minutes on that. So let's talk about BX manufacturing, today's webinar topic. So when we think about SAP Business One and we think of planning, it really doesn't have the dimensions needed in order to really make intelligent manufacturing decisions. And when you run MRP, and most SAP Business One customers don't use MRP because they can't really see how the data is really benefiting them. So what ends up happening is that they end up going back to spreadsheets, and they or management by shoe leather as they walk the floor in order to see things and talking to people, and they buy things or make things based off of intuition and just kind of the way that they used to do things. So customers that use MRP know that you can set up lead times, you can set up forecasts and those types of things. It kind of gets you a little bit of visibility, and I say it kind of gets you to kind of a second dimension, but it's really flat, and it's hard to really pull anything together if you have sub-assemblies that need to be made in order to make a master product. The lead times and everything kind of really starts to get messy, and it's hard to really kind of line everything up with your due dates so that you make a finished good in an efficient, just-in-time manner without a whole lot of human intervention. So what today's focus is going to be is on three-dimensional planning, where we can look at requirements of materials, requirements of sub-assemblies, capacity of our resources, and pulling all of that together. So as I mentioned, most companies will have multiple levels of machines, employees, or tools, or just products or sub-assemblies that are creating issues within the planning. So we have the ability to add a resource, being a machine, an employee, or a tool, into the BX manufacturing, and it can have up to 24 hours of capacity a day. And within that, we have the ability to have a single resource that ties to a feature, and then we can have that resource tied into a work center where, for example, if you have welding, you can have a specialized welder do certain work like TIG welding or something like that. And we have the ability to have multiple workshops and company calendars, and I'll get into the product and show how all of this information pulls together. So when we talk about multi-dimensions, as I mentioned, most customers kind of try and pull all of this together, and it's really hard to do. So here's a discrete manufacturing example. Know that it could be sewing, it could be making goop. It could be, you know, all different types of manufacturing. But in this example, you can see here where we cut, we tool, we fabricate, we assemble, we paint, we weld, we outsource heat treating or galvanizing. We have raw materials that we need. We have sub-assemblies or components, as a lot of manufacturers call them, that need to be made as part of the manufacturing. And then we might even have like CNC machines. And normally, one of these or a couple of these are bottlenecks. And it could be the fact that you have TIG welding, for example, and you need a specialized skilled labor of TIG welding in order for that to happen, and you only have 2 employees that are capable of doing that. So if you have a run on TIG welding, you have a capacity issue, and normal MRP would never, see that and tell you that. So I'm going to walk through an example of a company that's using our product. And no, they don't make the Caterpillar Draughts and the Caterpillar dump trucks. What they make are the high-strength steel parts. So they make these little components, or this ridge here, or anything that's kind of steel. The customer will send them a drawing, and they will cut it and form it and make parts, and then send them to the customer for the customer to use them in the assembly of making a Caterpillar piece of equipment. So here's at a high level what they do. They take a raw material steel plate and they cut it, and then they drill it, and it makes a part. Now they can cut it 3 different ways. They can plasma cut it, they can oxy cut it, they can wet cut it, but they have different types of machines that can do that. A plasma dry, a plasma oxy dry wet, and they have a plasma oxy dry drill machine that are capable of doing this. So you can see here that we could route this where it goes steel plate to cut to drill to a part, or it can go from steel plate into this machine and come out as a part. So obviously we want to maximize capacity on this machine and then use this process if required. So this is an actual breakdown of what we did in their implementation, and I could dwell on this a little bit here as far as the operation, the feature, and the resource, but I believe everybody here has implemented before, so they'll kind of understand this. And this is the most important thing, and it's the hardest thing for customers to understand, that you have an operation that sits on the bill of materials, so that could be cutting. And then you have a feature which could be plasma cutting, and then you have a resource or a work center that's capable of doing that plasma cutting. So sometimes this could be a one-to-one-to-one relationship. Other times it could be a many-to-one-to-one, or it could be a many-to-many-to-many, or a one-to-many-to-many. It really depends on the customer. So sometimes this is complex for the customer to understand, but it's important to note that we need these pieces in order for all of the MRP to work. So here's an example from 2013 when we implemented this customer that I had in the image there. And this is the plasma dry, the plasma oxy dry wet, the plasma oxy dry, and the oxy machine work centers. Now we could have went to another level where we had the work centers, and then we could have the resources like a tool or employee that were capable of doing things as well, but know that this customer didn't need to get to that level of dimension. So here's what their implementation actually looked like. They had a whole bunch of operations that converted to features, that converted to work centers. And you can see exactly what I said. You can have a many-to-one-to-one, or you could have a many-to-one-to-many, or you could have a one-to-one-to-many. The relationship is really kind of flexible, and you can see here that everything is trying to optimize this machine. And I'll show in the bill of materials setup how we can tell the system to optimize that machine. So that's enough with the theory. Let's jump into the product and spend the next 40 minutes looking at what we've done in SAP Business One in order to make make it more efficient and for the MRP to really work the way that I've highlighted so far. So the first thing that we've done is we've modified the bill of material. And I'm going to go into Business One now and show you. So I'm going to open up our bill of material. And you can see here that I have a standard SAP Business One product here that we're making. It's an SI 915. The description doesn't really matter in the process of a webinar. But what's important is we've added a few things to the bill of material that SAP Business One doesn't have. The first thing is a row type. So is it a material? Is it an operation? Is it an unfinished material? So something that we're pulling off the shelf that we put in as an unfinished product earlier. Is it a supplier material that's coming in from a supplier direct to the production order? Is it a byproduct that's going out of the production order and into an inventory of some other warehouse or the generic warehouse where you might have a byproduct that's sellable? We can assign costs and phantoms as well. And within the operation, we have the ability to have an internal operation or an outsourced operation. And with outsourced operations, we have the ability to do simple outsourcing where we just send a part out or we send something out and we cut a PO and we know that it's left the building for a little while and then we receive it back and we continue on our operations, or we can do complex outsourcing where it goes out as item A, whether, for example, if it's a screw when it leaves the building, and if it's galvanized, it's then a galvanized screw when it comes back. We can do complex outsourcing where we can actually have that part come back as part B. So it leaves as A and comes back as part B. So the next thing that we added is little icons just to kind of show you what in the bill of material is actually happening. So you can see here these are components that we need to buy. These are operations that we're going to do. And this little factory peak thing is a subassembly. So you can see here that I have a subassembly that has a subassembly. And this is going to become important when I show make to order a little bit later, that a couple of these items are assigned as make to order and one of them is assigned as a MRP item that needs to be made. So I'll show you how all of that kind of pulls together. So we have just the vision here to be able to see, you know, what's actually what. Then the other thing we did is we said SAP Business One doesn't really have a routing sequence where we do this, then we do this, then we do this. So we said, well, what if we added that logic just by inserting an operation and anything above that operation is part of it. So you can see here that this material, this drum case, is going to be part of this operation of cutting. And then we have bearing, bolts, and a hub that are, and this threaded end that are part of this assembly operation, and that we need to do this operation in order to do this operation. And I'm going to jump into the operation in a second, and I'll talk about how we can overlap and run things parallel and all of those good things. But just know that, you know, we did this sequencing where we said, you know, we can do this, or we can use these components when we do this operation, we use these components when we do this operation. And if we have sub-assemblies, it's going to know when it's scheduling things to drop things into the plan in order to make the things in just in time or in a you know, a forward planning perspective where it's going to drop things into the schedule properly based off of time standards and those types of things. So because we added this routing sequence, the other thing that we said is, well, wouldn't it be nice if from the shop floor when you're doing this operation we could consume this material? So we added this concept of being able to have a milestone where we consume on a milestone, or the beginning of every operation we consume materials, or every time I report booking, we book materials, or at the end of the production order. So when I make my 100th item of the 100 items that we're making, consume all of the materials. So that's one of the things that we've added, is this ability for us to have a milestone type. And when we have these milestone types, we can even, when we complete the final operation, if it's a milestone, it will actually do a goods receipt of the number of units that you've said that you've completed. So I'm going to show some shop floor data collection. Like I said, I'm probably going to start breaking these webinars out into specialized webinars where we'll focus on, just production data collection, because like I said, I could spend an hour and a half doing a standard demo, and I'm compressing this into an hour presentation today. So those are really the high level things that we added to a bill of material, is really, a couple of things that make things kind of make a lot more sense within SAP Business One. So as I said, we added this operation concept, and within this operation, we added a little link to open up a additional screen. Now, within the modules, production, we have the ability to set up a standardized operation. So you can see here that I have this A1001 operation, and I've set up some standard times here for before time, safety time, job time. And for example, if your customers don't call it safety time, they have some other thing, they call it setup or whatever it is, tooling or anything like that. You can rename these just like standard Business One. So, so here you can set up a standard for that operation, and then we can correlate that within the bill of material to just this item. So you can see here that I've taken this operation and now I've correlated it just to this operation, and I've added, or I can change times based off of that. So I can now update this. And so I have fields here that capture before times, job times, and teardown times or wait times afterwards. And then we can even set up a time base. So this is based off of making 1,000 units or making 1 unit for your job time. So these are static one time, and this is every time we make a piece, how much time is it going to take? And then, like I said, we have the ability to set up parallel and overlapping operations, and then you can say how many parallel operations and what's the overlapping quantities that we can run, and what's the minimum job quantities that you want to make. All of those, standard manufacturing type of questions. And then in the PowerPoint that I had at the beginning, if you remember, we had the operation, which is what are we doing? And then we had the feature, which is a little bit more detail about what we're doing. And then we have the work center, tool, employee, or constraint that's tied to this, that has a shift. And that shift can be unlimited 24 hours, or it could be, a 8-hour day, or a 2-shift or 3-shift, whatever the definition is. We go in and we define these shift types. In my demo database, we work 8-hour days for 4 days, and then we plan up to 1 o'clock on Fridays. So I work 40 hours in my plant, but I plan for 37 hours, so that it gives me 3 hours of slack every week in order to kind of, make up time and those types of things within my planning. So, and we can add here times, whatever it is. So we can have a standardized calendar, or you can have multiple calendars here. So you can see I have all these different calendars available to me where we can assign those to work centers. The other thing that we can do within the within the operation or within the work center is we can set up different cost types, and these cost types become really important because it's one of the other things that SAP doesn't really do a great job of for manufacturing is setting standard costing or calculating standard costing. So again, we can define cost types, And then we can assign costs based off of setup, job time, teardown time, and based off of quantity of fixed amounts, based off of quantities, or based off of just a fixed dollar overhead against the work center charges. So, and that'll come into play in about 30 seconds when I show you cost calculations. So that's getting real deep into the weeds of the operation and how it correlates to a feature, and then how that feature ties to a resource, and then how that resource ties to a work center, and then that work center ties to a schedule, and then how all of that pulls together in the planning I'll show in a few minutes. As I mentioned, we have the ability to outsource, and then this is where you can have lead time for your outsourcing, where, if you need to stage it or get it ready, you can set up units of measure for your outsourcing. So if you're buying galvanizing, for example, you can set up a unit of measure there, and then you can set up your supplier code, and it will create a purchase order from the execution of the production order as a setting, or from the where you go into the production order and you right-click and you say create a PO. You just go into the operation, you say there's a button here that says make PO. And again, like I said, I'm going to have separate sessions that we can break out and talk about those specific things, but basically on the production order there's a button that says make purchase order. We have the ability just to add documentation, so we can add different types of pictures or documentation that we want the shop floor to know about. And like I said, we could assign the cost types at the work center, or we can assign the cost types at the operation level. And then we have the ability to set up quality, and I'll show the quality screen here, but we can set up different values. Is it round? Is it square? Is it those types of pieces of information? So I'm going to open up this other operation here of assembly. I'm just going to show you where we have a preferred work center of line B, and it's a mandatory work center. And over here, if I go in and look at the resources, you can see that I have a line A and line B here. So I can actually have multiple work centers capable of doing this work, and then we can set up a preferred work center. And this becomes important when we do my job execution, that I have the ability to pull that off. Now, if we look at this bill of material, I said that I was going to get into cost calculation. You can see that SAP Business One says that this item should be $7.10. And as an implementation consultant, that's where I started in the SAP Business One channels as an implementation consultant. I really struggled with the concept of price lists in SAP Business One for a little while, because they didn't really have cost and then selling prices. They had price lists, and then you could define these price lists and kind of pull everything together. So I was really happy when I saw this, where we can go in and we can calculate a bill of material, and we have a price schema for selling prices, and we have a cost schema for costs. And this cost schema, I'll open it up first. There's algorithms that basically you can define and make however your customer wants it to be. So you can see here I have a line ID of MAT, but it can be 16 characters, and then you add a description, and then you can have a formula, and this $1 says look at source field 1. So you can see here all of the different fields that are available for us to pull information from. And this one is pulling the material cost for that item in. And then we can add another row where it's going to take setup costs, job costs, and teardown costs of those cost types that I've showed you that we can define. And I add those three things together. Then I add row 1 and row 2 together, and I times it by 12%. And the dollar here is just saying take it as a percentage here on this value. And then that's going to define an intermediate cost, and this intermediate cost allows me to assign price lists within my price schemas. So this is allowing me to see my costs and define my costs, And as you can see, this is all formula driven, and you have all of the different types of prices and costs and times available for you to pull everything together. So in mine, I have grab dollars and grab time, okay? And grab them as intermediates here. And that becomes really important because if I look at this price schema, what I do is I grab my intermediate cost here, and then I define that as price list 00 for my manufacturing cost. And then I take that and I take a 28% markup, and that is my minimum selling price. And then we can add different, calculations in order to get to a sales price. So you can define as many different price lists as you want, and what happens behind all of this is when I click calculate, it goes out and it says, hey, there's an item in this bill of material that you haven't defined a manufacturing cost for yet, or it doesn't have a manufacturing cost because you've never bought it. So can you help me out and define one, or I can ignore it and continue through. And then what it does is it says, okay, last time I calculated it, this is how much it was. Now I calculated this yesterday because I had a demo, so my price right now is the same as what it was last time. But you can see here that it's saying, okay, here's the price list that we're going to define. Do you want to accept these prices? And then it drops those into the item. So if we open up the item code here, it drops those into the different price lists here. You can see here, all of my different price lists are getting defined based off of that, me accepting that calculation. Now, I'm an accountant, so I don't quite trust just saying, okay, well, 211.68 sounds good, just accept it. So we have a structure back here that actually shows you, here's what we calculated for the manufacturing cost, and here's what we calculated for the time, and here's the cost types that we calculated. And you can see here at this high level, there's no cost types. And that's because it's not an operation. If I click on the operation and go to cost types, you can see that we have tools and work per hour, and here's the cost that it's pulling, and it pulls it all together. It shows you the resource that's actually pulling that, so it's showing you step by step exactly what's going on. Now if we look at a material, you can see that it grabs the material, it then grabs the overhead, and it calculates a manufacturing cost here. Now we can scroll across here and we can actually see all the different cost fields that are available to us in that drop down at the beginning, and then it shows a total cost here based off of the algorithm that you told it to add. So this gives you complete control over looking at it. So if you think that this item is off, the $6.16, we can literally click on the item, we can right click and we can see the the last purchase prices, we can see the inventory posting, whatever it is. As a cost controller, it's really easy for us to gain visibility to all of this information. So again, we could spend, there's a 24-page document, as 2 people in this webinar know, that is specifically around calculating a bill of material. But what's important to note is that you have control over those price lists and you have visibility to the cost. So I'm not going to dwell much more on the bill of materials and those types of things. I'm going to go through a couple slides here. I showed you the cost controlling. So the next thing I want to do is I want to show you the MRP and how we jump in and we give you pegging information and capacity information when we run MRP. So I just grab MRP. The people that are in this meeting have all seen SAP Business One MRP, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the selection criteria here. What's important to note is that there's a little checkbox here that says use BX MRP. And when I click run, we take over the MRP and we then do what I call 80-20. Here's the 20% that it can't allocate because we have a demand for 1,000 of these units, that are due today, and we can't make them because these work centers aren't available in order to do it. So that's the first thing, and then it gives us a decision tree, and we'll see this in a couple different places. We'll see it in the production order as well, where you can actually see the decision tree, and you can see the work center that's stuck, and we can go into that work center and add a shift if we wanted, or we can just go into the demand and change the demand date. But you can see here what it's doing is it's just laying out everything, and if we scroll down a little bit here, and if I put this out to week view, we can actually see here this round bar, is going to be consumed at certain times based off of the demand. But you can see this this round part here consumes things separately, and it pulls everything together so that you can gain visibility to the timing of everything. And just like Business One, all that's going to do is it's going to oops, I forgot to show you the pegging. I'll just run it. We can actually go and look at the pegging here, and it will show us that it's recommending a virtual, either a purchase order, like in this case, it's recommending a purchase order on that date, or we can go down into something that we manufacture, and we can look at it. We can actually see if there's an existing production order that it's referencing, or if it's recommending that we make a production order. So if we go here and look at if we go here and look at this item, I clicked on the same item again, sorry. You can see it will show a virtual production order if there's demand for a virtual production order. Let me just see here. Trying to find a manufactured item here. There you go. It's recommending a production order for this item, and it's dropping it into the schedule. So, it's dropping it in on the dates that you want, and then it'll also tell you if you have problems with it, which in this one it does have a problem. And if you remember, that's why it had a little red X through it when I clicked on it. And then again, all that's doing is making recommendations. So you can go in and look at these recommendations, and you can then execute purchase requests, purchase orders, production orders, so on and so forth. You can change your quantities. You can see all the different due dates, and you can see here that we actually put the due dates red so that you can see that they're late because of capacity issues and those types of things up front. So the next thing that we get into is a couple of different areas within the manufacturing side of things. So MRP is going to make production orders and recommendations for production orders. So we can go in here and you can pick up your recommendation, and we can go in and we can update that. It'll create a production order. And as a production manager, SAP Business One with sub-assemblies and everything else becomes really difficult, because what you have to do is you have to either have an alert that tells you that a production order has been added, or they literally live in the open items list for production orders, and then they have to click on the production order and release it, or sort it by plan and then go in here. And there's no real link here that shows you what sub-assembly is tied to what, so it's really hard to kind of pull everything together. So there's a couple things that we've done in order to make that easier. The first thing is that we added this production management cockpit, and the production management cockpit allows you to look up planned orders or look up released orders, sort it by make to order scenarios, which I'll show right at the end of today's webinar. We have the ability to sort this by item groups, certain products, so on and so forth. And then I can load it. And then we have an 80-20 here as well, where here's a work order that we have a problem with, and I can see that this work center, and there's a common theme there if you've noticed, this work center has capacity issues. This work center it can't allocate the work to because there's just not enough available time there, so it'll show you existing production orders that have problems as well here. Now, the other thing that we've done here is we've added this concept of forward and backward planning, where you can go back from due date or forward from earliest date, and also the preferred, if you remember that preferred work center of assembly line B, we can try and maximize work, but these are the due dates that we would hit in order to make the items based off of preferred. And you can see here the due dates of when the items are due, and you can also see the begin date if you do preferred versus the earliest. So you can see here that obviously this production order, the preferred line B, is not available until November 11th, but if we used line A, we could get it through on 11/03, we could start doing this work. So this just gives you that visibility to the production orders. The other thing that it gives you the capability of doing is if you have a bunch of planned orders here, if they're tied together here to a sales order, you can see that they're tied to a sales order. So we can actually release and close production orders here en masse. So I can go in and I can say change these selected, and we can close them, we can put them back to plan, we can release them, we can cancel them, we can change the due dates here, we can change the allocation strategy, so on and so forth. And then it just gives you control versus having to go into each document. You can literally go in here and select all, and say change selected to, forward planning or backward planning, and then, it'll recalculate everything, and then you can kind of play around with different things in order to see how things are kind of pulling together. So this screen, production managers love, especially existing SAP Business One clients, because it really gives them control over seeing what's going on. And then this is another one, and for the two people that have implemented, there's some new functionality on this that you've probably never seen before, and that is the ability to drag and drop. So I'm going to go into our job scheduling control panel here, and this job scheduling control panel lays out all of the production operations into their work centers, tools, and employees. And here you can see this is the work centers, this is the tools, this is the employees. And if you have certain things that are correlated, you'd be able to see it here. I'm going to uncheck the tools, and I'm just going to look at work centers right now. And if we scroll up, you can see all of the different work centers that are correlated here, and the production orders that are dropped on. If I hover over top of it, I can see what we're making. If I click the cog here, I can look at this by production orders, or I can look at this by products, or I can look at it by make-to-order scenarios. So if you have a bunch of sub-assemblies, you can actually see all of those different pieces, or if you have lots of, if you're manufacturing lots of components in that make-to-order scenario, you can see them all together here. So this will just change the color here of these items based off of what you're making, so you can group things together that are made. So that's one thing that I don't know if a lot of you have seen. The other thing we can do here is we can look at this by time scale, so we can look at it by minutes, hours, days. This is a newer icon as well for the two people that have implemented. And over here, obviously, we used to be able to double-click, and that double-click would take you to the product or the operation, depending on the setting here. So I'm just going to click on this, and you can see right now when I click in, I'm going to the operation. You can see here that you can choose where you want it to put the focus. Now, you used to have to go in here and do this, where you'd actually select this and pin it down if you've ever implemented and had somebody that wanted to pin something down. And then on the job scheduling control panel, it would put this little push pin on there. So new functionality is you are allowed to drag and drop on this now. and if you can either drag it to other work centers that are allowed to do that operation, or I can just drag this out forward and it will rejig everything. So you can see here I've grabbed this and it's allowing me to just move this and drop it in. And once I drop it in, it's now kind of said, hey, you've kind of earmarked this over here now. And now if I hit the recalculate, it's going to ask if I want to save. I can click update on the bottom here as well. I'm going to refresh. It's going to say, do you want to save? I'm going to say yes. And now it's going to drop this into the schedule here, and it's going to put a push pin on it. So this is what I call the BX manufacturing solution will automatically schedule everything based off of the algorithms of the availability and the time. You can also do it semi-automatic, where you can have it drop in everything and then you can move things around for certain departments that you really care about, or you can do it fully manual, where you can just go in and you can drag and drop all of these operations and do whatever you like. And if you do that, and if there's things that you're doing before other things, it'll actually show you an arrow here saying you're doing this, you're finishing this before this, and you have a child production order there, so you might want to finish this, so you might want to move this out, and it's just giving you that information of what you're actually doing. You can see the production order number here as well, and it gives you a little arrow showing you where that production order actually is here, so you can see it here. So now I can drag and pull this back over here, and refresh, and hopefully I remove that error, and it shows you all of that information as you go. So that's our job scheduling control panel. It's really easy to use. It's graphical, and like I said, it's manual, semi-automatic, or fully automated, depending on what you want to do with it. On the production order side of things, both of you have kind of seen production order execution, so I don't know if I need to spend a lot of time on this, but basically the production orders look very similar to the bill of material, where we've added in the components and items and those types of things, and we have a little icon here that tells you if you're going to have problems with certain capacity issues here. Here's an outsourced operation, as I said earlier, where we can go in, we can click on this forging bracket, for example, here, and I can go to the outsourcing tab, and here I can just say make a new purchase order. And you can see here now it's created this purchase order. It's brought me to the purchase order. It's saying this is the material that's going out. This is the quantity. So this is where those two quantities can be different, the quantity that's going out versus the quantity that you cut on the purchase order. And away you go. So that is the outsourced operations where you can link it. And now if we look at that operation, it'll actually show you the purchase order down here. You can actually see the purchase order and the status of that purchase order. And on the production orders as well, you can go in here, and we have the visibility through this operational sequence diagram, where it'll actually show you the operations and when they're planned. And if you set up those lead times and set up the times properly, it'll actually show you, this needs to come back on this date, and then we're going to do this work. So you can just see, the percentages of what's completed or not completed, at a high level view here. So over here on the operation side of things, you can see if there's been any components issued or anything completed. As you're completing things here, you can see this has actually been issued one here of 200. That were being made. So if we look at the operation sequence diagram of this, you can see all these operations that are tied to it, and we can expand or collapse this down to different levels here, so you can see just, this is the operation that you're doing, or you can see, every single operation allocation ID, because if you remember, every operation gets dropped into the schedule. So if we go and look at the job requirement list of this one and print this, so this is like a shop traveler, every operation gets dropped into that schedule, if you remember, on certain times. And then those times get dropped in and it gets an allocation ID here. And these allocation IDs are all in the system here for us to see at a grid view if we wanted to see them instead of just at a high-level view. So if we go into the production report area here, and if we look at our allocations, we can see our resource allocations by a different work center or whatever it is, and you can see all of our allocations and our allocation IDs here, so our production order operation IDs. So all of this information correlates over, and that's how everything kind of gets pulled all together, and you can see exactly the status of everything. The shop floor traveler we'll use in a few seconds, so I'm just going to leave it open. So that is the production order where everything's kind of tied together and how the outsourced operation ties together to it. On the shop floor, we have the ability to capture data from our PDC, so we can go in here. I scan my badge, I log in, I scan that operation, so 562-1. I'm doing cutting, I say start a job, and then it says, this is what you're making, and then I say done, and then I can come back when I'm done that job, log in, and then it says you're doing this work, and then I can say stop, and then I can say how many I made, so I'll just say that I made 200, and I can say done, and then it'll say, well, if you did 200, you should have used 200 of this, and then I could update the material here, and then I can say done, and then done, and now if we go look at production order 562, you can see I've issued 201 now, and if we go and look at our operation sequence diagram, it's going to show that first operation is 100% complete now. So you can see here we're 100% complete this. So now, depending on your rules, the next operation can pick this up. If you're allowed to do parallel, then it would drop it in. But this is just showing you, and this is Crystal reports, so you can make these reports look however you want. You could have pictures in them, so on and so forth. I'm going to spend the last couple seconds talking about make to order. And make to order, I can do a full webinar on it as well, but I'll just kind of cover the high level concept. So there's a couple things to note. So I'm just going to choose a customer here. I'm going to put in a delivery date of when the customer is expecting this. So I'll just put in 11:30, and I'll add that item, the P1001. And I'm going to open up this item here. I'm going to show you that you can see here that we have this, that it's a make-to-order item. So we may have long lead items that are make-to-order items. We might have sub-assemblies that are make-to-order items, so on and so forth. So if I click add on this right now, I'm ordering one of these. It's 11:30. It should be fine in the schedule. But down here I have this MRP date. And this is telling me the earliest that we can complete this order is 10:20. So you can see here that 11:30, we're fine. Now, if you remember, I have a lot of job time in mine. So, and the reason I do that is so that I can do this. If I make 10,000 of these, the MRP date is 8/28/2017, and it makes my delivery date red here. So we can actually, when we go to hit add, we could actually do a hey, stop. So just that's one thing that we can do here. So I'll just say that we're making 10 of these. The other thing that we can do is we can actually calculate the bill of material here. So we can go in and calculate that price. So if I right-click here, we can go calculate the sales order. And you can see this is doing exactly the same thing that I showed earlier with the cost schema, the calculation. If I have permissions to look into the structure here, we could actually see all the structure of how it's doing that pricing, and it's going to pull everything together. So make to order can be executed two different ways. We can do it through the MRP here. We can go into make to order, and this will look at all sales orders that haven't had a production order created for that it's MTO, and we could make a whole bunch of them together right now. So here you can see all of the orders that it's loading in. It's it's going to load in all of the sales orders that have make to order, and our sales order would be in here somewhere, probably near the bottom. So you can do it at the end of the day or at the end of the week. You can do all of your make to order planning that way. Or a lot of companies are one-to-one where they have one-to-one. So I'm just going to click make to order planning on this. And it says, okay, here's the screen that I just showed you. But it's selected it down to just this sales order now. And it's going to go through and it's going to look at all of the items and all of the MTO items. So here it's saying you need to make production orders of these, and you need to order these long lead items here. And the other thing it's doing is you can see here it's logically dropping in the dates of when you're actually going to need things based off of when those items are consumed within the production orders. Now you'll notice that the M1001 item shows up twice. That's because it's actually in this BOM and it's in this BOM. So so that's why it has two due dates here. One's going to get used in this BOM and one's going to get used in this BOM. So it's correlating everything together of when you're actually going to need those things. And then when I say update here, it creates the purchase orders, it creates the production orders, and it drops everything into the sales order very nicely. So let's go look at the sales order now, because make-to-order companies really struggle with this. I want to see the status of all the orders. So here's all of our purchase orders and production orders that are tied to the sales order, the status of them, if they're planned or released, if their completed quantities are reported, it will actually show here that the completed quantities are done, and it's giving us all of the information that we need right from the sales order. The other thing it's doing is we have a little graph here where you can actually see it correlated out into the dates here, and you can see the percentages completed. As I'm reporting completions, it's going to show percentages completed of when things are done. And it's using Standard Business One, so if we go and look at our relationship map, it's written in the production orders here, and you can see the dates are all staggered based off of the logic. And if we go to the production orders here, we can actually see it's written in the sales order here and correlated all of that information back into Business One. So the MTO is really powerful for customers that kind of do that job shop stuff, because it allows you to do things really quickly. And when I talk about job shops, the other thing that's within Business One is normally you have to duplicate a bill of material in Business One and then define an item, and it's really kind of backwards, right? So we fixed that as well, and I don't know if either of you know this, but if I go to this item and if I duplicate this item, and we just call it webinar 1001, and if I add this item now, it's giving me a cost warning. But then it says, do you want to duplicate the bill of material as well? So then I can say yes. And now I can go into find mode. I can go into web, call up that item, and you can see our bill of material is already here. We can now tweak that to whatever we need it to be for that item, and away we go. So for job shops, the make to order, those two pieces of functionality make it really, really easy for people to pull things together. Now within the shop floor data collection, we also have quality capture, where we can, I showed you the parameters, so this is where it's actually showing you how many items you've inspected, how many have been good, rejected, repairable, and also you can capture measurements here. So what did you actually capture as a measurement? And those measurements will pass or fail your components based off of those parameters, if it's within allowable parameters or not. So that concludes today's webinar. I'm going to stop recording and I'm going to open it up to question and answers. I thank you for your time and look forward to working with you in the future.